guys, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started because I know this is your day off, and I'm excited that you guys are here, but I'm sure that you guys have lots of other things that you want to get done today. So today we're going to talk about interviewing, and I have a very special guest, somebody who is near and dear to my heart, is almost like a dad to me. His name is Trace Scopel. He is a retired partner with Moss Adams, and I had the pleasure of working with him for almost 20 years, and he is
still like 30.
What was that?
Seemed like 30.
Yes, yes. He is still one of my favorite humans on the planet and a great mentor to me. I've learned a lot from him. And so I've invited him here today to share some of his knowledge, or my knowledge that I've taught him, with all of you. So I am going to share my screen and turn it over to you, Trace. Students, just as you guys know, I can't see you guys once I share my screen. So if you need something, you have to unmute. Trace, do you want questions during, or do you want questions at the end?
I'm fine either way. I mean, if you want to do it as we go, that's probably fine. So whatever works.
Perfect. So you guys are welcome to save them till the end or unmute. You can also drop your questions in the comments and we can ask them at the end for you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Trace, as I share my screen here.
All right.
So just real quick, can somebody, or Trace, since you're unmuted, can you see my screen?
I can see your screen.
Perfect. Okay, we're good to go.
Well, first of all, I guess thank you, Jessica, for having me. I'm excited and a little nervous because I haven't done this in a while. I've been retired for about 2.5 years, but when I did work at Moss Adams, I worked closely with Jessica for, as she said, close to 20 years, and she was our recruiting manager, and I was kind of the recruiting partner for our office in Eugene. So I've done a lot of recruiting and interviewing. It's actually something I really enjoy, and I'm hoping when we get done with this today, you guys will be looking forward to interviewing rather than saying, "Oh my gosh, I have an interview coming." So that's kind of my goal for the day, is to get people jazzed about interviewing and making it fun. And you know, it's something that you have to be able to go through and do, and hopefully I can share some knowledge. One of the things I guess I've always told students, because I know as a as a recruiter for looking for people who want to work, I look at it as being a two-way street. You guys are interviewing me almost as much as I'm interviewing you. I think Jessica will agree. We've never gone into interviews saying, "Gosh, I hope everyone is terrible." We want you to be successful. So, but it's also really important for you to make sure that maybe we like you, but you got to make sure you like us too. So it's a two-way street. I know that's a little, I always share that, but I know people don't believe me, but that really is the case. You need to make sure that when you're interviewing, whoever you're interviewing with, it's somebody that you feel comfortable, because they're trying to put their best foot forward too. They want to hire good people, and they're trying to show you that they want you to come to work for them. So again, it's a two-way street. And you're interviewing the person who's interviewing you as much as they're interviewing you. So that's just kind of my first tip for the day, I guess. So there we go. Types of interviews on the screen there. You can kind of go through and see. It's kind of interesting in the world we live in right now, because I'm guessing a lot of the interviews are probably more virtual than the traditional face-to-face kind of thing. I would encourage people, and I talked to Jessica, just ask her about it just before we started, is the best way to improve on something is doing it. It's practice makes perfect, and I would encourage people to do as many mock interviews as they can, just to get comfortable with the whole process. The more you do something, the better you're gonna get at it. You will be nervous when you interview. That's just part of the deal. I'm nervous when I interview people. I want to put my best foot forward. But I think it's really important, if you have the opportunity, to put yourself out there and do some mock interviews. It's something that I think it will help you in the long run when you actually have an interview that really you want to go through and do. You know, another thought on this on the informational piece of it. You know, people say, yeah, this is just an informational interview. You interview and we're just going to share information. But I can remember on one occasion at Moss Adams, we had an informational interview set up. We took a young man to lunch, myself and another one of our partners, and he was great. And we came back and we looked at each other and said, well, why don't we just hire this guy? And we ended up hiring him, and he didn't go through the formal interview process at all. So again, it's one of those things where you're always trying to put your best foot forward and do the mock interview, do the informational. The phone interview, video interview, that's always kind of interesting. It's a little bit different because you have to go through and you don't have the chance to actually see people face to face. But again, it's something, I think it's the world we live in right now. And it's important that you're comfortable in that. If you get the opportunity of the traditional face to face, I guess, taking COVID out of the whole situation, to me, that's the best way to go. You get a chance to really experience the person that you're interviewing with, and also just learn, and they get a chance to know you a little bit better. But again, takeaways from this slide is do mock interviews if you can, and also the informational thing can turn into more than just informational. Be prepared for both of those type of situations, and we'll talk about some of the things you need to do to get prepared. But I'd encourage you to do both those kind of interviews if you get the opportunity.
Trace, can I add something to this slide?
No. Yeah, go ahead.
So you guys, first you'll notice that I never listen to what Trace says. He's not in charge here, but for informational,
things never change.
No, things don't change. Jobs change, but people don't, right? So one of the things with informational interviews, a lot of times when I'm talking to people that are trying to figure out what program they want to study in college, I'll say, think about, the type of career that you want. A lot of times people are like, well, I want to do this, but I don't really know what type of education I need. This is a great time to do an informational interview. Is if you want to be a specific type of nurse, maybe you talk to that person and interview them to find out what training they received, what type of extra skills they need, type of pay, those kind of things. That's where an informational interview is really important. And that can be a little scary as well. One of the things that I do is kind of help people write interview questions. So when they're going to an interview, what questions can they bring? And we'll probably talk about that later on in the session. But I want to kind of get your mindset around interviewing isn't just you being interviewed, but like Trace said, it's a two-way street. So keep that in mind. The other type of informational interview that you might end up doing is actually for school. Like if you're part of the paper or like the school paper, or you're doing a research paper and you need to interview someone. For example, if you're a senior and you're doing OSAC, you may have heard of the Seneca Scholarship. I have a student that's working on that, and you have to interview 3 professionals in forest product industry. So interviewing isn't something that you're just going to use to get a job, to get a scholarship or an appointment for a volunteer, but it could be academic as well. So keep that in mind.
This one's always a fun one, and it's you want to make sure that you're properly attired when you go to your interview. The face-to-face, that's a little bit different in the fact that, you're going to see everything you're wearing. I'll be full disclosure, I've got sweatpants and flip-flops on underneath my shirt right now down below. So I'm not, but I still feel like I'm properly attired for this interview. But it's important to go through and make sure you look, and I'm going to say professional, and I'm not sure if that's the right word, but look appropriate. Again, most of my interviewing has been for CPA firms, and people come in suits and ties. I don't think that's the expectation. Jessica, you can jump in here on some of the stuff, but I guess I would say dress appropriately. Don't wear tennis shoes. Wear if you have a button-down shirt or a nice dress or a nice pair of slacks, I would say wear those. You want to go through and make sure you look appropriate. And it says dress for success, and you're going to be that you look successful. So the actual attire is obviously very important. In the world we live in right now, too, with all the Zoom and the WebEx stuff that's going on, it's really important to make sure you've got yourself positioned in a way where you're back, what the people are seeing looks good. You know, I know Noah, Jessica commented on you and looking good. So and again, I think you look good for for a video kind of situation. Yeah, thanks for the thumbs up on that. But I mean, you don't want to be sitting in bed doing an interview. You know, you want to be in a situation where you are, at a desk. Hopefully, hopefully you have the ability to get to a place where it can be quiet, so you don't have people walking through the back of your, during your interview. It's very distracting for you and also very distracting for the interviewer. And so those are some things that are kind of new to the world that we live in right now with the whole virtual interviewing process, is to go through and try to, besides just being appropriately attired, with regards to dress, also try to make sure you have a spot where you feel very comfortable and it's a professional, appropriate kind of situation where you can get the most out of the interview and it's not distracting to you, the interviewer, or to you guys. So again, that's something that's just kind of new to the world we live in, but I think it's important. I have done a couple of interviews, recently on Zoom, and people have done a really good job. It was a quiet setting, and I think it's important just to make sure you do that. So Jessica, anything to add on that one?
Yeah, so one thing I will say for attire is really dressing the part for the job or the scholarship that you are applying for. So for example, if you are going into a job interview for an apprenticeship in plumbing, you're probably not going to wear a suit and tie, and so a little more relaxed would be appropriate. However, if you're going into a scholarship application or an interview to work in a office environment, you're going to want to change your style and look a little bit. I know one of the things, even when we do mock interviews, I make students come see me before they go into their mock interview, and I've told people they have to brush their hair, they have to take their hat off, they can't wear that sweatshirt, and and really it's kind of one of those things that over time you'll figure it out, but as you're learning, it's okay to ask, would you consider this an appropriate interview? A couple of things that I will say, and maybe not in this environment with everything being virtual, but if you are going in a face-to-face, one of the things that I always like to tell people is, tone it down on the perfumes and the colognes and things like that, because you never know, it might be great for you, but you don't know what others in the interview will think of that. Maybe they're sensitive, that kind of stuff. Go easy for females. I can say this because I'm a female, but go easy on, makeup, jewelry, things like that. And just, sometimes we have to think about what looks good to us maybe isn't coming across the same way to others. So it's really good to get other people's opinions. And I have to do that too with certain pieces. So, if you're ever in doubt, I would say, check in with us or a teacher or someone and say, hey, I have this interview, what do you think? Maybe it's your metals teacher, if they're going into welding or something like that. I don't know. But, those are kind of things to think about.
And I promised I wasn't going to toot Jessica's horn too much, but I think I will. She makes a really good point, and she is a great advocate for all the students. I just want to say that she wants you guys to be successful, and I would probably take her up on the offer of saying, hey, here's what I'm going to wear in my interview. Take a look. What do you think? And she'll give you very direct feedback, which is good because it's better to have that before your interview than during or after or whatnot. So I would say definitely utilize Jessica. She wants you all to be successful. She wants you to get what you guys want to go through and get out of, whether it's a position or a school to get into. She will advocate for you and trust her with some of her critiques and whatnot and stuff like that. She's got your best interest at heart. So this one's a no-brainer, pretty easy. Be on time. Be the first person on this. If it's a virtual thing, be the first one on the call. Get there 2 minutes early. You may think that's kind of dorky because you're sitting there with nothing to do for 2 minutes, but I guarantee when when somebody comes on, they see you're there waiting, that shows you that you're eager, and you want the opportunity, but definitely arrive a little bit early. Again, as it says in the slide, don't show up 15 minutes early for a Zoom call, because you're wasting about 13 minutes of your day. But it is important. Definitely don't be late. I mean, if you're late to an interview, you're trying to show your best foot forward. Are you going to be late for your first day of the job? Are you going to be late for the class that you really want to get into? If it's a scholastic kind of situation, but it's really important that you are there on time and definitely not late. So that's pretty self-explanatory, I think. So.
So I'm just going to add, first impressions are so important, and you don't get to redo those. So, all of these things that Trace is talking to you guys about, I really hope that you're letting it sink in. Trace hasn't shared very many stories yet, so I'm going to share a story. One of the things I always do ahead of an interview is I actually go and drive to the place so I know where I'm going, so I don't get lost, and I know exactly, because I don't want to be late. That's one of my big fears, is being late. My husband always makes us late for everything. So when it's just me, I make sure that I'm early, because that's important to me. But a few years back, I went to an interview, and I actually got there about 10 minutes early. So I sat in my car for 5 minutes. I looked on, Instagram or whatever, and then I went in for my interview. Well, it turned out that the gentleman that was interviewing me happens to be our interim principal now. He said, "Oh," he's like, "you must be Jessica," and I said, "Oh, how did you know?" Because it was a place where many people were coming in and out of. He said, "Well, you arrived about 10 minutes early, and you didn't want to be too early for your interview, so you sat in your car for 5 minutes." And of course, I thought, well, that was crazy, but he was absolutely right. I didn't want to be too early. I wanted to be just about like 5 minutes early, but I also wanted to make sure I knew where I was going. And so we as interviewers know this, but it's just important. So that first impression was him realizing that I was trying to make that effort of being somewhere, on time, but a little bit early. And he was appreciative of that. So I agree with what Trace is saying.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, I think of all the slides we're going to see today, this is the one I think that has probably got the most important pieces to it. Is you need to be prepared. And we can talk about each one of these various aspects, and I've added a couple additional ones just from reading through it. But this is something that you guys need to be prepared. You need to go through, and if it's if it's a company you're looking at, the world that we live in with the social media and the internet access to different things, you can go to a company's website and find out what's going on with that company. I know when we were interviewing for Moss Adams, we were always adding offices, and we always left time for students to ask questions about the company, and definitely have questions. But if somebody said, "Well, I see you're opening up a new office in Albuquerque, can you tell me a little bit about that?" I mean, those are things maybe you don't really give a rip whether we have an office in Albuquerque or not, but that shows that you had the motivation to go to the website and kind of see what's going on. And I really encourage people to go through and do that as much as possible. I think it's important that you have that ability. When nothing's worse than when you, at the end of an interview, say, "Well, do you have any questions for me?" And the student or the candidate says, "No, I think you covered everything." To me, that shows you haven't done a lot of research. You can kind of go through and do it. And the other one that's not on here, and I want to touch base on a little bit. Again, this is a little stalker-esque, but I would also research the person you're going to interview with. You know what I mean? Again, you can go on social media and find things, or just Google the name of the interviewer and find out what he or she, what their background is. I know when I interviewed, one of my things at Moss Adams is I did a lot of construction and real estate. That was my area of expertise. And I have a variety of students who would say, "Well, yeah, I understand you do construction. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?" So you can kind of find out about what they're doing, and also maybe their interests, and maybe the person interviewing you really is enjoys hiking, and maybe you can somehow weave that into your interview and just say, yeah, I enjoy hiking. I see you enjoy hiking. I enjoy hiking. What was your give me a the best hike you've been on in the last little bit or whatnot. So I think it's really important for you to educate yourself about both the company and also the interviewer. Because being really honest, and Jessica will agree to this too, I think, is that we go on social media when we're looking at candidates at Moss Adams, and what you have on your social media is important. There's some stuff is just spooky, crazy, eerie, and it's kind of like, okay, this person can be brilliant and a great interview, but they've got some weird stuff going on. And I'm not telling you, but everything's out there. So I mean, you utilize it to the best of your advantage. But also be careful with what you're posting on social media. Jessica, I know you want to say something right now. I can see that in your look in your eyes. So dive in.
So I had to pull my phone out and Google Trace Scopel, and the first thing that comes up for Trace is LinkedIn. If you don't know what LinkedIn is, I'm sure Trace is an expert at it. But it's a professional social media, I'd say, kind of like Facebook, but for professionals. And then the second thing that came up was Moss Adams names new partner in charge. That was 2015. So Trace doesn't have a lot going on on the internet, which is actually good. I was a little bit concerned about what he's been doing since he was retired, but looks like he's been clean. So it's as easy as that, is just doing a quick search on the company or the individual. And I will even say, on researching the company, if it's a scholarship, research the scholarship. So if it's Springfield Rotary, really understanding what Rotary is, what the values are. We have several scholarships that offer or that ask to do interviews. It is really nice for somebody who is considering giving you thousands of dollars to know that you took the time out to research their organization or them as an individual if it's a private donor. So that is a really good tip.
Yep. And again, I think that with the research, the company interview, it basically is going through and having questions to ask during the interview, and you need to be prepared for that. And I'd say probably have 3 or 4 questions. I mean, I know when I used to interview, we interview in 30-minute blocks, and I would go through, and I'd always leave probably like about 5 to 10 minutes at the end for questions from the student or the candidate. And it was really important because I think, and again, you may pick up some questions during the course of the first part of an interview, but I think it's really important to have some of that stuff in your back pocket, because like I said, there's nothing that probably is, I would use the word discouraging, but you get to the end and say, no, I think I got everything I need. Are you really interested in the position? So I really encourage you to go through and do that. The last one on this piece is be prepared to answer questions about yourself. I mean, I think everyone, one of the questions that I never ask it, because I always ask really weird questions, and I think Jessica's going to share some of the weird questions that I've asked in the past. But what are your strengths? And those are easy to kind of go through and do. But definitely have 3 or 4 strengths that you can share, and also maybe an example of that. If you're really a hard worker, I work 25 hours a week after school, the blah, 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 so I can make money for college, kind of things. I think there's stuff like that. But you can also, the areas of development, people ask about that also, I believe. And I think you can take those areas for development and kind of almost tweak them into another strength where, gosh, one of the things I do, here's an example. I really seem to get myself overbooked. I get involved in a lot of different things, and that's because I'm passionate about a lot of different things. But I think it's one thing I really need to do is really kind of focus in on just a couple of things. The fact that you're passionate about lots of things, that's what a lot of people, I think you need to be passionate about lots of things in your life. And I think that can be an area that you can say, well, that's an area for development. It really, you can kind of almost switch it and turn it into a strength. So again, probably have a couple of those. Don't have 10 areas for development, and 3 strengths. I mean, but I think you can come up with probably areas for development, and don't be dishonest or distrustful. But I mean, I just come up with things that, okay, this is something I struggle with, but I can see I can turn it into a positive. So again, as I said earlier, I think this is the most important slide in the whole deck. And if you're ready if you've researched the company and you've researched the interviewer, have those questions available, and then be really prepared to answer questions that they're going to go through and ask. And I'll share the question. Well, Jessica, you told me the last time we talked you were going to share one of the weird questions that I always ask. Is this the right time? Is this the right time?
Well, I want to comment on the being prepared. One of the things that I would challenge you to do is talk to friends, talk to teachers, talk to your parents about what your strengths and weaknesses are or areas for development, because sometimes other people see things within you that you don't. So for example, when I was interviewing, I would talk to people that I worked with, people that I'm close with, and ask them, like, what are some of my strengths? And what are some areas that you see that I can continue to grow, continue to develop? And I would actually write them out. I would always bring a notebook with me to my interview with those written out so that I could talk about them. I would also jot down notes of examples I wanted to make sure of things that I felt like were really important, that highlighted myself and my skills. So I would encourage you to, talk to other people, because again, they may come up with something that you don't think of, and it might be something that you're like, oh, that is so true, and I would not even have thought of that as a strength. And it could be the one thing that interviewer looks at and goes, wow, that is amazing. So that would be just my my tip for that. As far as interviewing, Trace, one of the things I truly believe is, being able to answer questions on your toes. So I might not share your interview thing and keep using it for years to come.
But I don't interview people anymore, so I don't know. So
I do, and
you're going to use that one. Okay, all right.
For our podcast, I used your interview question.
Okay, all right. So good.
You can share it at the end. It's fine.
It's not a problem. So I don't know if you want to do that or not. So this one's very important too. As I said earlier at the start, nobody goes into wanting to have a bad interview. You need to go into it and being positive is huge. Going through there and you're interviewing for either a scholarship or a school or a position. You want to put your best foot forward, and attitude is huge. You know what I mean? It's very, very important. And if you go in there and you're kind of down in the dumps, gosh, today's not a good day, you got to be as positive as you possibly can be. So you want to go in there and just be really positive, smile. Nothing's more off-putting when you meet somebody and they're so negative that after 3 minutes of the interview, going like, I don't think I'm ever going to want to hire this person. And sometimes people come in and they're just off their game, but at the same time, you need to be prepared. Sit up straight, smile. Just be positive. You want to go through and put your best foot forward, and attitude is incredibly important, because if you come in with a poor attitude or you're negative, and I give you an example of an interview I had a long time ago, and we didn't hire this person, but most of her responses were that it was somebody else's fault. They didn't treat me properly. It was, and it got to the point where you go, okay, maybe once, but for almost every question it was that way, and it was very uninspiring to me, and we did not even consider making this person an offer just because it was such a negative situation. And it's kind of interesting. I've stayed in contact with this person even though she never went to work for us, and she continues to do that to this day, and it's continues, and I don't feel comfortable saying, you're causing a lot of harm yourself. You need to go through and get positive. But I mean, really, that's very, very off-putting, and I think you need to go through and really stay away from the negative pieces and really focus in on positive, because you want the interview's probably 30 minutes. You can put your best foot forward and your best face on for 30 minutes, but it's really important to focus in on the positive and not on the negatives.
And I think to kind of go hand in hand with that, employers may even ask you about difficult situations. And I know we did at Moss Adams, and I hear continually during mock interviews employers asking that. And so I would suggest, if you have a situation where maybe you worked in teams and you didn't get along or didn't go your way, that you find the positive within that situation and come at it from that standpoint. Or maybe it didn't work out as you planned, and how you would go about it differently going forward. So we can always find a situation and find that positive in it. And I think that is really important, especially when you're interviewing. I know for me, there's been a lot of times where things didn't go my way, or, maybe I didn't get along with somebody. And I look back now at how could I have changed or done something differently? Because maybe I can't change that situation or that individual, but I can change how I respond. And so I think that one shows maturity, but it also, when you're thinking about a lot of places working teams, they're really looking for somebody that can work with different personalities in a team setting. And they don't want to hire someone that's going to rock the boat, but be a positive influence and work well with others.
Again, this is a little bit of a just kind of a rehash, maybe a summary of kind of some of the slides before. But as Jessica said, first impressions are incredibly important. You want to come in and you want to be positive. You want to have the eye contact. It's very, very important. And handshake, if you can do the handshake, you can do the handshake. Maybe a fist bump if you're doing it now. I don't know, whatever you feel comfortable with. Smiling, being positive. These are all things we've kind of talked a little bit about. But I think that probably the thing, and it kind of goes back to what we talked about when different types of interviews, is practice makes perfect. And I'd really encourage people to go through and do as many mock interviews, informational interviews as you possibly can. Again, I think that's going to make the whole process, I won't say easier, but less difficult to kind of go through and do. The more you do something, the better you're going to get. And it says practice makes perfect. I think it may be never, there's probably never a perfect interview, but I think the more you do it, and a lot of it is just sitting down and getting to be comfortable about talking about yourself. I mean, that's something that a lot of people, unless they're incredibly confident, and I would say confidence is good, don't be cocky, but a lot of people don't really like to talk about themselves. And really, I think it's important to get as much practice as you possibly can. And I think that the mock interview is a great way to do it. Again, Jessica, you can share with them what they probably know, what they can and can't go through and do, or what you have available. But I would encourage people. It's a lot easier when you had a couple mock interviews when you go into the real one. If you sit there and just kind of go for your interview that you really want the position or the school or the scholarship, and you haven't had that practice, it's a lot nicer when you have a couple of practices behind you.
So one of the things that I'm in a public speaking class right now, and one of the things every week we have to record ourselves doing a speech, and our peers critique us. And for the first 2 or 3 weeks, I wouldn't watch my videos because I was too mortified of what I looked like. And then I started watching them, and of course I'm my biggest critic. And I wasn't reading the critiques because I didn't want to know. I didn't want to know. And that was really a disservice to myself because they were really great critiques of little things that I could do to improve upon. And so once I got over that awkwardness and uncomfortable, and I just sat in that uncomfortable state, I was able to then absorb those critiques that they were providing. I was able to watch my video and see areas that I needed to focus on. And I continually, every now, I see myself improving. And it's not just about, eye contact and speaking, but it is about smiling and your presence and all of that. So I would challenge you guys to talk to yourself in front of a mirror. It is super uncomfortable and super awkward, but give yourself a pep talk. Talk about your strengths. Talk about your areas for development. maybe even record yourself and watch it, and then record yourself again. Keep just practicing, and I promise you will continue to improve. Get other people's input. Like Trey said, we can do mock interviews at the school. You can do mock interviews with your parent or with a friend. It's just the more you practice, the more you are going to improve.
This one is, I think, again, I keep saying these are all these are important, but this is one I think that is always kind of helped me. If I was questioning whether we should hire someone or whatnot, it was always nice. I think you need to make sure you thank the interviewer for his or her time. In the world that we live in, it's easy to bang out a quick email, but I think a handwritten card is 10 times stronger than the email. It takes me back to my childhood when I had to write thank you notes for every Christmas present I got. My mom made me. Yeah, I see Noah nodding his head. Every Christmas present I got when I was like 6 years old, and my mom sitting there saying, "Trace, you got to write." She said Tracy at the time. "Tracy, you got to write a thank you note." And I'm going, "This is crazy," but it's something I did, and getting a handwritten thank you note scores major points. So I would really encourage you to do it with a card. It doesn't have to be anything major. Just say, "Hey, I really appreciate our time. I'm very interested in the opportunity. Thank you so much." And do it timely. You can have a stack of thank you cards, and just bang them out. And you can say the same thing to everyone if you want to, but I think it's really important just to have that. It's very important to go through and do that, and do it in a handwritten form if you possibly can. So I think that's huge, and try to get it done in a timely manner. Getting a thank you card 2 days after your interview says, okay, that's important. So, and no, I thank you for your notes. So.
And you guys, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Do you have anything to add? I was just going to say, yeah.
I was just going to say that we do have thank you notes at the school. And even though we are virtual right now, we can, make arrangements. If you need to pick up a thank you note or a few, we have them. We will ask you to do that with scholarship after you receive a scholarship, after an interview. So we do have those on hand. If that's something that you need, if you're not able to get one, just reach out and we'll get you that, because it is really important. And I know for me, I save my thank you notes. If you're at Thurston, you see them on my board. They mean so much to me. I have ones that I keep in a drawer from when I worked at Moss Adams, some that Trace gave me that I go back every once in a while and read when I need that feel-good moment. Because they are meaningful, and I think they're kind of rare nowadays for people to do a handwritten note. So take that extra little effort. It doesn't take a lot of time, because it is very meaningful, and I think it's very powerful.
Yeah, totally agree.
So, questions. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so I can see faces. You guys let me know if you have any questions. Anybody? Let's see. I'll look in the chat and see what's happening over here.
Can you give some examples on what kinds of questions they would be asking us, for a job interview?
Sure. Well, I can give you some of the questions I used to ask. I would always, I'm a nice guy. I'm a people pleaser kind of guy. I'm touchy feely kind of guy in a not a creepy way.
We don't use those words, Grace.
What's that?
We don't use those words in high school.
Oh, I know. But what I would do the first interview, what I did, and I just wanted to put everybody at ease. I would always go through, and again, my name is Trace, and you don't know if I'm a male or a female. And I got rejection letters from a lot of the CPA firms I first applied to and on my first resume, I was a decent football player, so I put down some of the things I did in football, and I'd get rejection letters addressed to Miss Trace Scopel. So I'm going, well, those suckers never read my whole resume to find out. So I always went through and I would read the whole resume, and I get down to the bottom where it talks about interests. My first question I always ask was something related to that person's interest. And I did that because one, I wanted to prove that I had read the full resume, and two, I thought it was a good way to go through and just set that person at ease, because you sit down with a interview, and it is, as much as I say it goes both ways, it's scary, so it's something that you could start with. Again, a hiking question, or somebody was a really good ping pong player, so I talked to them about ping pong. I know nothing about ping pong, but to get them kind of going. And then the other questions I would ask the strengths and the weaknesses kind of questions. I would ask, and again, a lot of the students that we recruited from Oregon State, and say, why did you decide to go to Oregon? Or why did you decide to go to Oregon State? What's wrong with you? Why did you decide an accounting degree, for crying out loud? There's got to be some problems there. And then I kind of raise into some other questions. I mean, one of the ones that I could ask is, this one I got some really crazy answers, is, can you tell me about the riskiest decision you've ever made and how that turned out? And I think the most unusual answer I got on that one was, I met a guy and we got married 2 weeks later. And I said, okay, that's risky. It's a little crazy. I don't know if I would have shared that in a situation like that. But again, those are some of the questions. I'll let Jessica say the question that she thinks is so great for later. But it's more of those things. And I'd probably ask 5 or 6 questions, and there'd be questions that would come out of responses from the student or the candidate. But yeah, those are kind of the questions I think you got to expect: the strengths and weaknesses. I never use, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Because I don't think that's really a decent question anymore. But I think those are kind of the things you're going to kind of get. I don't know, Jessica, you probably have some. Those are my Moss Adams questions. I'm not sure what else you have and some of the other stuff you've done and what other people ask. So.
Well, I think the really important thing about interviewing is it's a conversation, right? So we're really trying to find out about you as you're trying to find out about us. So we want you to elaborate on your responses. A short answer doesn't serve you, because we're trying to find out as much as we can as possible. Now, when I say that, I don't want you to go ahead and open the gates to everything that's ever happened in your life, but I do want you to highlight on the wonderful things that you have done. And I think we are also different and unique, that we have done some incredible things. And I think that's really important for you guys to realize, is Noah has done some amazing things, but I know, I'm talking about, it's crazy. But Sierra, you have as well, and they're so different and so unique that, you bring different things to the table. So I think it's really more about, not so much about what the questions maybe are, but you feeling comfortable and confident enough to talk about yourself, the areas that you shine in and the areas that maybe you need to work on, because everybody has those things. Trace maybe not as much as many, because I think there's only like 2 things that I would probably say he needs to work on, and he knows what they are because I told him bluntly. But most people have a lot of things that they have to work on, and that is okay. In this life, we are supposed to continue to grow and learn, and some in the areas that we do well, but also the areas that we need to develop. Okay, I almost coughed, so I had to mute there. Any other questions that you guys have? Tell me this, if you would. What kind of things are you interviewing for? Is it scholarships? Is it College of Honor? Is it jobs? Would love to hear from you.
Okay, so it's mostly just scholarships. I have a job currently that I didn't have to interview for, so I've never had to do like an interview or anything. So I was just more curious about that, because obviously after college too, I'm gonna have to do interviews. So just the lessons, the experiences, stuff like that.
For myself, mostly my near focus is scholarship opportunities. I'm also aware that I want to be able to use this for jobs in the future. And also there is a fraternity that I've applied for that there's an interview process. So I'm hoping to use that for this as well.
Mine would be for scholarships and college admins for now.
Mine would probably be for scholarships, and I also have an interview coming up soon for Twin Rivers Rotary. I got like a scholarship for like it was like my counselor picked me to get a scholarship for them, and they wanted to interview me about my passions and stuff like that. So I thought I'd come in, update on my interview knowledge.
Mine is for scholarships and college.
Awesome. So let me ask you guys this. I hear, a lot of scholarships, which is amazing, college and different jobs, things like that, maybe jobs after college or maybe even while you're in college. Do you think that this is helpful informationally? Do you come into this or leaving this, do you think, okay, I have some things now, some new knowledge that I can put into play to help me? Noah's got notes. It doesn't surprise me one bit. Yes, good job, Sierra. Okay, good. So I'm seeing some notes. I'm seeing some, nods. Is there anything that you can think of, like, that we didn't touch on or that you're still kind of nervous that you want? I mean, this is the time. So, Trace has, I don't know how many years of experience. It was like 30 back in the day, so it must be like 40 now, years of experience. We worked together really closely for a long time. We recruited people for not just Eugene, but for all over, 24 different offices. So we've met a lot of people. We traveled to different states and placed people in California and Washington and, New Mexico, so all over. So we've met a lot. We've heard a lot of stories. This is like your time if you're like having a question or, and I know it's kind of hard being in this environment. It's kind of scary to ask questions, but I would encourage you right now, like if there is something you want to know, just ask it. And this is like that safe place, and we want to answer those questions for you. So is there anything that you're thinking like you want us to kind of elaborate on a little more or share some more stories?
Yeah, I was wondering more about how to kind of tread the line between what's an area to grow, but also how to turn it into like a positive thing. I know we touched on that briefly with a few examples, but I was just wondering what your experience has been with that.
Well, yeah, it's individual, obviously. What you have there, but I guess my thoughts were just basically, I talked a little bit about, having too much on their plate. And one of the questions that people ask a lot is like, well, time management is something that I struggle with. And that's because I have so much stuff on my plate. And then and then you can turn and say, but what I've done to rectify that is I go through and I use a daily planner or whatever. Again, I don't know if high school kids use daily planners. I know college kids use daily planners. Sure, high school students and college students use. No, you're to the front of the class, or you're ready, But I mean, I think you can kind of go through there and say, yeah, time management again is something that I got a lot on my plate, and but here's what I've done to, here's what I'm doing to fix that, I guess, or improve that. It's kind of going through and doing those kind of things. And I think when it comes to scholarship, I'm guessing scholarship people are wanting to go through and see what you're doing. And if you're doing, it's better to be doing 10 things, and maybe you can go through and say, here's the 10 things I'm doing. And I struggle with that, and I'm trying to really go through and make sure I can fit everything in really, really well. And so that's another one. It's kind of the time management, too much on my plate kind of thing. I think that's one that you can kind of go through and do. I don't want you to create areas of development just so you have to convert them into strengths, but if that's something you go through and do, I think it's important to share that with them and saying, yeah, I recognize this is something I need to work on, and here's what I'm already doing to do it. And I guess I would look at that if people say time management's a problem, but here's what I'm doing to make it better. I go and say, well, I check the box saying people recognize this is an area they need to work on, and they're doing something about it. So hopefully that answers the question. I guess I kind of use the same kind of an example, but I think you can kind of see what you can kind of go through and do.
So I guess just to add on to that, a lot of times working with high school students, I hear, well, I don't have any experience. And I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about that. Have you ever babysat? Have you ever house sat? Have you been part of any extracurriculars, theater, band, sports? And all of those opportunities are experience. And so then we kind of talk about really the experience that you have is experience. It's just not in your mind what they might be looking for. And I always kind of say, well, that's not true. So I always say experience, right? Is you're young, you're just getting out there. And so an area for development for all of you guys is gaining experience, hands-on experience, okay? I'm going to give a personal example just because I do think it's one that I've used before. And it's something that, for me, it's a huge area of development because Trace may feel differently, but I feel like I had this really successful career for a very long time. But when I left Moss Adams, I realized that I left and the opportunities that I was able to, I guess, go after were very limited. And the reason why that was, and this is probably kind of like a good thing for all you guys that are like thinking about going to college and scholarships, this is going to be a motivator for you. When I left my 20-year career, very successful. I mean, I think I was successful. Trace, this is the time where you say, yes, you were amazing.
Yes, you were amazing.
Thank you. I'll buy you that coffee later. But I actually never finished college. So for me, that is an area of development, is that I realized that I was able to work in this firm and grow, but without that piece of paper. But a lot of places I wasn't able to do that. And so I am actually currently a student. So for me, that's an area of growth. That's an area for me to develop. Is I saw a need in my life that I wanted to better myself. And so that's an area that I can speak of now because it's something that I've been continually working on. So does that help, Sierra? Give you some ideas? Okay, perfect. And I will highly recommend not being, 40-something years old with 3 kids and working a full-time job and going back to school. Do it now because it's a lot harder later on in life. I guarantee you that. So what other questions?
This is something that I recognize this is something I recognize that I can struggle with. And I'm curious as to your guys' advice as far as reading the room or like reading the environment of you and your interviewer and whoever else might be there.
Just can you be a little bit more specific? I guess I'm not sure exactly what the question was. Sorry.
I guess like what is appropriate to reflect in the personality that's being expressed or the emotion that's in the room, and what's going to be appropriate to balance that out differently. Like where is your point as the interviewee?
Trace, I'm going to take this one and then I'm going to let you think on it as I talk and add on to it. So I know Noah because I've known him since he was in elementary school, so I can talk about this. And I know he is, if you know Noah, he is a great kid. He is funny. He's got a lot going for him. I think Noah and I have a very similar personality we have big personalities, okay? And sometimes I have to tone down my personality a little bit when it comes to an interview. And kind of, I use the phrase, read the room. I kind of have to see what the environment is like before I'm able to kind of show who I am. Now, I say that, but I also don't want to change who I am for anybody. So I'm not willing to, be this very professional, very straight-laced, zoned in person when my personality is big and I am like a go-getter and things like that. So I think, yes, you want to kind of pull back a little bit, show that you are professional, but at the same time, that is part of who you are. And you want them to not be surprised when 3 months down the road, you're like, personality's coming out and you're go, go, go. And they're like, who is this kid? This is not the Noah we hired. So I think there is finding that fine balance of being professional, but showing a little bit of your personality at the same time.
And thanks for clarifying that, Jessica. I guess another add on to that too is, one of the things I said at the start is you're interviewing the company or the school as much as they're interviewing you. And I think, you talked about a fraternity or whatnot, you know what I mean? And if you get in the interview with these guys and you just feel like you can't really be yourself, maybe there's a different fraternity you should be looking at, you know what I mean? And again, not to try to say, well, gosh, but if you just don't, I've interviewed where I've had situations where I just didn't feel comfortable and I just knew it wasn't the right fit for me. And I walked away from those opportunities. So I think a lot of it is you got to be, as Jessica said, you got to be true to yourself. You don't want to go in there and high five people when you walk in the door. Hey, dude, how you doing? If that's your personality, that's cool. But you want to go in there and you want it to be professional. But if you just don't feel like you can really truly be yourself, and you feel like you're kind of like, I got to keep pumping the brakes all the time, it maybe that's a sign to you that it's not the right fit for you. So I think that's kind of important. So you kind of read that. Like I say, it's a two-way street. They're recruiting you, you're recruiting them, and maybe if it's just I don't want to say terribly uncomfortable, but if it just doesn't feel right, it probably you got to trust your gut sometimes. It's one of the things I learned at Moss Adams was all about GGF, which is a very high-level accounting acronym. It means good gut feel. So if my gut didn't feel right, I kind of knew I probably shouldn't be doing that, I guess. So I guess I'd say just trust your gut on that. If it just feels too uncomfortable for you, and maybe it's not the right spot.
Really good question.
Yeah.
And thank you guys for your response.
Yeah, sure. So Jessica, do we wrap at 11? Is that the set time, or?
Yeah, we are going to wrap up here. I just wanted to see if anybody else had any questions. I want to be respectful of Trace's time. Retirement's really hard. He's got a lot of, sleeping and working out to do.
I gotta put my shoes on.
Yes. Any other questions? Okay, great. Well, you guys, thank you so much for coming. Oh, Trace has a comment.
I just want to say maybe a couple things to kind of close. One is I've already said this, but really utilize Jessica as much as you possibly can. That's one of her biggest strengths is she advocates for you. She'll advocate for you guys. So she might maybe want whatever you want even more than you want it. So I definitely utilize Jessica as much as you possibly can. So that's the first thing. And second thing is we talk about when you're your first, you don't feel like you have a lot of stuff to put on your, that really counts as quality stuff. My first resume, I'm not proud of this, but I'm sharing it with you now 50 years later. One of my accomplishments was I was bartender of the month at Taylor's Coffee Shop at University of Oregon campus. So that was on my first resume. I figured thank you very much. And the last thing is, and Jessica doesn't even know this, but I've been retired for 2.5 years. I interviewed for a job about a month ago. And my first time I've interviewed, being the interviewee, I was scared to death. I didn't know what to think. It was all done virtually and stuff like that. So even though I say, don't get stressed out, here's a 65-year-old guy who's interviewed probably hundreds and hundreds of students, been through this a whole bunch of times, and I get interviewed and I'm kind of nervous about it. So I guess what I'm saying, it's okay to be nervous. If you're not nervous, there's probably something wrong there. So hopefully that's encouraging to you that even a guy my age still is nervous about interviews. But again, I've enjoyed getting a chance to chat with you guys, and it's been fun. Jessica, thanks for inviting me. And I'm happy to answer questions. If people want to email me or whatnot, you feel free to give them my email, Jess. So that's fine.
Awesome, great. I actually am gonna put because you offered, I'm putting your email in the chat right now. So if you guys have questions, you can reach. We're gonna all send him emails right after this. You can reach out to Trace. It's in the chat. You can also email me and I can connect you with him or answer questions. I'm happy to do that. Trace, thank you so much. I joke with you quite a bit, but I love bantering with you. And when this topic came up, you were the first person I thought of, and so I'm glad that you said yes and came and talked to our students. I really appreciate it. I will go write you a handwritten thank you note.
All right, I like it. And Jessica, I would be really bummed out if you thought of somebody else besides me as the first person when this topic came up. So.
Well, I did think about myself for like half a second and realized that everything I know from you. So.
Yeah, geez, it's getting deep here. Give me a shovel. So.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming. I appreciate it, and we will be putting this up on YouTube. If you want to go back and check anything out, I will stay on for a few more minutes if you guys have questions. Otherwise, go enjoy a long break before third quarter starts.